Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. So I think most of you guys have been to my collaboration dinners and some of my other things in my talks. You know, I focus a lot on innovation. A lot of what I'm doing in those dinners is showcasing modern innovation. I've just got a view. Some of you have heard it before that it exploded around, COVID 2020, and it's just progressed since then. And I'm on a bit of a soapbox just because I see the attackers leveraging it more than the enterprises as I see, companies being disrupted, and we're kind of a lagging market here in Houston. And so, I'm really kind of trying to get everybody to move it along. A lot of people focus on innovation, think it's more experimental, risky, it's got a bad stigma. I tend to look at what I think is not working, especially when you take into account trajectories of data, threats, other things, and project them out a couple of years. And, just look for areas where the challenges are large, companies aren't on a sustainable path given those challenges and the trajectory. And then try to find solutions. I speak a lot at conferences. I'm always going around to the different tech providers looking for game changers. Maybe 1 out of 20 will be a game changer, maybe 1 out of 10 of those I'll end up kind of partnering up with and trying to showcase to other companies. And so, as I've done that, and I've probably had 25 to 30 dinners and engagements over the last 3 years, I've really noticed one thing, that identity and access management is really, even though innovation's moving fast, IAM is really kind of slowing up the modernization. It's a problem that encompasses and kind of spreads and interconnects throughout all this. If you think about IAM efforts, they touch every user, so they have high impact. You think about all the identity juggling, all the multiple systems, all the different regulations and laws that involve in this, the processes that are ineffective, like Sarbanes-Oxley sign-offs that people rubber stamp. And there's just a lot of issues with IAM that are causing problems. So I really decided to start focusing on it in the spring. I'll take different topics that are important, kind of focus on them. So I did a dinner on agentic AI with an IAM use case. This company had gone out and polled, hundreds of CISOs, and that was at the top of their list of challenges. And then in doing the discovery and looking at it, I really kind of came across the frontline worker, deskless workforce as a massive opportunity that isn't being addressed. And so that's what led me to these guys who you're going to see today. So if you don't mind, can you guys forward the slide? So basically, you've got this whole deskless workforce that's rapidly getting digitized, right? So you've got increasing enterprise apps that are getting pushed out to them. Companies are spending millions of dollars on those. You've got converging OT, IT, more IoT. And if you look at, I like trends and trajectories. If you look at what's happened for knowledge workers and compare it to this space, that's kind of on the left here. You've had this evolution, where you've seen more and more in the knowledge or the desk worker side of, early software as a service, and then software as a service expand to all the functions. And then now we're really getting into AI powered SaaS. But you've had applications that have provided IAM throughout all this, like Okta. If you flip over and look on the right side at these deskless industries, the frontline workers, you've still seen more and more systems, more devices, more automation pushed to the edge, but you haven't seen these IAM solutions. So really that side is more than a decade behind the deskless workforce. You guys will flip it to the next one. And so you've got all these increasing use of apps at work, increased smart devices, OT/IT convergence that's taking place. Thousands of rollouts that aren't really being fully optimized because, employees won't do single sign in, or they can't get data from the edge from these workers effectively. And so many companies are not really fully addressing the space before they get into a lot of these efforts or in their strategies. If you guys will flip it to the next one. And so, just to kind of frame the problem a little bit, those workforce needs are real different. A lot of times you're using shared devices, You can't use safe credentials. You can't use SMS or MFA. These are employees that are logging in and out, 10 times a day. If you take one worker and it takes 45 seconds to do that, that can amount to 60 hours a year, multiply that by 1,000, and you can really start to see the size of the productivity issue in this. These are workers that, they wear gloves, they speak multiple languages, some don't speak English, so and they really can't afford delays, especially with the evolution that we're seeing in Houston, where you're kind of going from the traditional manufacturing refineries to like high-tech factories, right? With Samsung's doing it, Apple and NVIDIA and all the explosion in that space. You're going to see fewer workers, but there's a much higher expectation for productivity, certainly no IAM issues. And then when you look at the solutions that are out there, on the right side here, the names, like Okta, Ping ID, they're completely inconvenient for this subset of the population. Mobile-based, FIDO-based, are unsuitable for shared devices. You can't take a phone into a refinery, right? It might create a spark. Hardware-based ones are very expensive. There's a lot of waste in those, like YubiKeys and stuff like that. People lose them. You guys will flip to the next one. So companies are really having to make trade-offs, right? We need a balance, right? So if they go too far to security using the traditional methods and tools, then they really lock things down too much. If they go farther to usability, then it opens up a lot of gaps. So there's this issue, that we're seeing because of current methods that's affecting a large population. If you guys will flip to the next one. And I'm a risk guy. I was a former chief risk officer and CISO at Plains. And so this is an area where, as I looked into it and saw this big gap and saw that companies were addressing it, I think it's an area of max exposure right now. And this kind of breaks it down a little bit. So you've got compliance risks. Obviously, MFA requirements are going to the top of the list, especially in regulated industries. Some data points there, failure to achieve those penalties can be, on average, $250,000 a day. There's a few examples of some pretty big enforcement actions. National Securities Corp was penalized $3 million for not implementing MFA. You've got some real security risks too, with over $9 million of breach. According to the Verizon report, 35% of breaches are from frontline sectors. And then for companies that really kind of lean towards security, you can have big productivity issues and higher IT costs. Here are some numbers here. And I think this example is kind of a company that's in a little higher churn, like seasonal workers, which you see a lot of, and just focus on the passwords, on lost passwords or changing passwords or anything, and came up with, estimated 5.2 million a year productivity loss, over $1 million in higher IT costs, just resetting passwords, things like that. But you get into a lot of, tough to quantify costs too that I've experienced, and I'm sure many of you have directly. You get apathy, when it's so difficult, and these efforts don't really anticipate the needs of this workforce. And they're kind of being addressed after they get rolled out. You get sub-optimized huge investments. You get apathy. As more and more functionality is rolled out, where, that just adds to the issue. You get data issues, you get training issues. There's a lot of stuff that's very difficult to quantify, but it's having very high impact. If you guys will flip to the next one. And the opportunity, it's not just a risk cost thing. The opportunity is huge. If you look at the breakdown, there are two times, the subset is two times the knowledge workforce, the desk employees, but really underserved by the major IAM players. So on the knowledge workforce side, I mean, we're talking 1 billion employees globally versus 1.8 billion for the deskless workforce. And companies like Okta and Ping and some of the other players have created a $19 billion market on that side, but there's really no scale IAM player on the other side. If you look at the US numbers, the gap's a little smaller. Those are the little numbers besides the 1 and the 1.8, the 81 to 87. But if you think about Houston, I don't think that's the case in Houston, because we're really kind of front line for this whole push into, higher automation, more manufacturing. And, anybody that's skeptical of that's happening, it's actually been happening for the last 10 years. You could see it driving along I-10, with all the big plants and, with Samsung, and Apple and NVIDIA, what all these guys are doing. I mean, that's going to happen in Texas and already is before anywhere else, due to factors like low energy costs and a great labor force. It's a little cheaper than the rest of the country and friendly, business friendly regulatory environments and just infrastructure like the ports and rail and those types of things. And so I really think that as I've looked into this and talked to other people, and we had a great discussion at the dinner, there is a massive workforce here. There are all sorts of hosts of issues and use case were really coming up left and right. You guys will flip it to the next one. And so this sets up, really for a solution, which is what I'm always on the hunt for. I'm kind of framing the problem here based on what I've learned. And we're going to be looking at showing you guys a solution, but a deskless focus IAM framework, right? And if you break it down into the pieces, you've got higher authentication needs with this population. You've got big, HR enterprise systems that are expecting people to access them in a secure and efficient way. You've got, doctor shifts, you've got productivity issues. The major players see this need, like Microsoft, and they're kind of trying to launch things, but not very successfully. You've got the real risks, 75, some data points here, 75% of frontline industry breaches involving passwords. 1 in 5 deskless enterprises have open shared devices, no login. Of course, people, where do they put the passwords, right? On sticky notes. We've all seen that. And then higher compliance needs. We're all heading in a direction of higher requirements for MFA. If you got government contracts and you can't meet these requirements, companies are going to lose those government contracts. And then, regulatory acts that are really setting the temperature and the goals, so you can expect the trajectory is only going to increase towards those type of solutions. So that's I just wanted to break down the problem a little bit. I like to do that in these dinners. And obviously we're not gonna have 3 hours to collaborate here. This session's a little bit more about providing the information for those that missed the dinner around the solution and the need. We've got a little poll here. We're wondering if you guys could be so kind as to fill it in just so we can gather a little bit of information, provide some context as these guys show the solution. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mohit and Madhu, the CEO and the CTO of OLOID. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Al. Really appreciate it. And see if everybody's able to see my screen. And if not, please speak up. Good to see you all. Thanks for joining. My name is Mohit Garg. I'm the co-founder and CEO of OLOID. And I think Al set it up perfectly for me. And I think I'm going to build on a lot of the concepts that Al talked about, how we are looking at this opportunity with the offline world meeting the online world. And that kind of is the secret behind our name, OLOID, online linked offline identity. And what I'm going to do is take us through an initial set of slides that talk about our vision and how we are addressing this opportunity in the market. And then Madhu will talk about the product and how it fulfills this opportunity. So let me paint the vision behind the company and why we exist and what problem we're looking to solve. And it is really about making the day in the life of a frontline worker frictionless and secure. And we do that across the different parts of the work life of a worker, right from when they enter the premises, could be a factory, could be warehouse, could be a retail store, to how they start their shift with clocking activity, to how they're using tablets, Zebra devices, PCs, to then accessing applications which may be secured behind a ping or an Okta SSO. And then in regulated industries, how MFA requirements are a necessity for compliance and business continuity. Along with that is a life cycle view of how you onboard and offboard employees potentially in a high churn environment, where you might have seasonal workers, contractors, just industry like retail, manufacturing, where there's intrinsically a lot of seasonal employment and people rolling in and rolling off. So across this, we have built a layer of passwordless authentication specifically designed for frontline workers and shared devices. We're a venture funded company backed by Okta, Honeywell, Dell, and we have had the opportunity to partner with many large companies like GE, Takeda, Flex, Snap-on, Pepsi. And across the board, as you can see from these testimonials, it has been an authentication pain point. It's either a situation where they have implemented security safeguards. So they are progressive IT players. Their CISOs and CIOs have mandated higher security with sophisticated passwords, password rotation policies. So it is secure, but now they're facing user experiences challenges and friction. In other situations, they already have a password-based system, which could be a shared password. They haven't implemented SSO, but now they're struggling because they need to do MFA. And imagine doing MFA on shared devices, doing it when you already are struggling with passwords, introducing a second factor becomes really hard. So we have gone about solving this problem by putting a layer of physical identity-based authentication on top of existing solutions. So if you have existing Zebra devices, you have existing applications and SSOs, we use standards-based interfaces, OIDC, SAML, and passkeys, and then we introduce what are other than knowledge factors. So either what you carry or who you are, like face, badge being primary factors that are used in the environments we work in. We support others as well. But this takes away some of the problems that Al talked about. No need for typing or recalling complex password, makes it truly passwordless. No requirement of one-to-one device mapping or fingerprinting, which is typical to traditional FIDO solutions. No need for personal email or phone access for OTPs or sending any kind of authentication information. And obviously, once we do it with passwords, we are eliminating the risk of phishing attacks, especially with shared accounts. So it's really moving the right side of the picture, which we all have implemented very beautifully in our organizations, where we have Microsoft Azure ID, Entra, or some Okta, or some other secure way of authenticating the existing framework of knowledge worker apps, whether it is HR systems, whether it is CRMs. This problem was solved with password first and reliance on personal devices to our framework, which is passwordless and designed for shared devices. And this is about also taking advantage of some of the opportunities that have presented with improvement in biometrics, liveness that Madhu will talk about. So providing a secure and many times a single factor which suffices with more than enough security that you don't even need two factors, which can be complicated. The ultimate objective when we partner with our customers is to work on a vision for unifying identity. So going from a situation specifically from the context of a frontline worker, where you will have a separate identity loaded into a UKG or Workday or ADP time clock, where they could be using fingerprint or a badge access, to a completely disconnected identity sitting on some legacy on-prem applications where there's a local Windows username password, potentially a post-it note with that username password on that PC, to then also situations where you have SSO enabled applications, you have potentially some WebAuth, FIDO in your ecosystem, and then you have OT systems, which now obviously are not leveraging your IT framework. The opportunity is to bring it all together. So once OLOID integrates with all these systems, a big part of our value proposition is how we connect with existing physical access control systems, PACs, where the data for the badge resides. You already have a process when you hire an employee to configure their RFID badge for accessing the building. Now that data isn't always easily synchronized with your IT systems. And potentially now you have the SSO cloud applications and you have on-prem legacy applications, and they may have different username passwords and obviously shared devices, tablets. So we are looking at coming in with the existing infrastructure, taking this 96 apps in the enterprise, which are not managed by their IDP, and doing full identity orchestration. We do that across different types of platforms. We covered some of this. I'll be quick because I talked about this already. There is the SSO and MFA framework. Whatever you have, you bring it with you. Okta, Microsoft Entra, Ping ID, Duo. We support all of those and you plug right into it. We take your local Windows PCs login, create a credential manager. Madhu will talk about the specifics of how we implement that. We come in into Android and iOS devices, iPhones, tablets, and Zebra devices and browser-based app. So now you are able to put this layer of physical identity-based authentication, face-based authentication, badge-based authentication, MFA with these physical factors, and combine it with a consistent authentication across the day of the life, no matter where the frontline worker is accessing it. An example where we have implemented this at scale would be Tyson Foods. Most of us are familiar, very large food packaging and distribution company, Fortune 500. Huge facilities, which you can imagine are in the central part of US, where now employees, they are not your typical knowledge worker where they have a company provided phone and they're very familiar with the authenticator apps. You're talking about potentially even employees who have trouble understanding business English, right? They may not be conversational with any tech speak, so you can't really give them instructions. So we started working with Tyson Foods more than 3 years ago when they had implemented an SSO front end to all their HR applications to give them training applications, access to payroll, pay stubs, apply for leave, job mobility. But they were seeing a huge friction in workers not being able to access these critical employee apps. There were challenges because the long password and password rotation policy, almost the 30% that were able to log in were resetting the password every single time. So these kiosks, which had all the relevant information available to the employees, had a friction for the employees being able to log in and access them. So we implemented the OLOID integration with Okta in this case. We put in the option for the workers to use their face-based authentication or badge-based authentication and log in into this kiosks and workstations without any password entry. This has resulted in much higher access and completion rates. There is much lower IT costs. As I mentioned, employees were resetting the password every time they would log in. So this would result in high IT costs, thousands and thousands of IT support tickets, and each of them will go through a business case, was creating a burden, a busy work for the IT team. And because of the access of these resources, the employees were feeling like the organization is not providing them the opportunity to access the infrastructure which supports their job progression, checking payroll, and all the important things. So when we looked at an organization of that scale and we said, can we quantify what it does in terms of hard savings, in terms of the benefits that can help justify certain investment? Because obviously we talked about from a security standpoint, user experience standpoint, this is a necessity, but we all have to go internally sell the ROI of technology investments. And we divided that into two parts. One, which is the low-hanging fruit of IT support tickets. So before, after, how many support tickets did you get before implementing a passwordless program? Versus now that you don't have password, you don't have password resets, then you're going to be saving a couple of $1 million for a large organization. We're talking about tens of thousands of IT tickets saved because of not having to deal with passwords. And then the calculations and assumptions around how much time are the employees saving because they're not waiting for resetting the password? How many hours are they saving because they're not stuck trying to log in and figuring out how to access the application? And this amounts to a pretty substantial number, because when you're talking about a very large organization, like most of us will look at frontline worker organizations employing thousands of employees. For a sizable organization, this comes to over 20 million. So we have a ROI calculator. We do the partnership with our customers and help build a business case. But it's really 3 to 4 hours employee hours, productive hours saved per year, and this adds up to a significant number. So I'm going to hand it over to Madhu to take us through the product and talk about the how customers leverage it, some real demos, and the backend of the infrastructure. But if you have any questions from my end of the presentation, I look forward to your questions, and I'll hand it over to Madhu.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Mohit, and thanks, Al. So yeah, I think today I'm going to be focusing on how frontline workers use our technology. Of course, the authentication piece, which we made it extremely simple, straightforward, things that pretty much any frontline workers should be able to do. And the factors themselves are not something we ask our customers to choose. We usually advise them on the pros and cons of each factor. So depending on your situation, a face may be a better factor, or in other cases, a badge or an NFC tag may be a better factor. But we have a list of factors that we feel that should satisfy most of scenarios. And it's again something that you don't have to just choose one. You can choose multiple, and you can choose multiple in different scenarios depending on the type of devices and applications they're accessing. So maybe we can quickly start out with a quick demo of the face. So if you want to click on that, or I can share my screen. Let me do that.
Yeah, go ahead, Madhu. You can share your screen. Go for it. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you. All right. So essentially, let me start with a kind of a Windows-based login first. So in Windows, if we have shared PCs, an end user can essentially come in front of the PC, take a quick selfie, and that's it. They get authenticated into Windows. We can authenticate them as a shared account or an individual account, again, in Windows. Same with badge-based factors as well. The end users can come in front of the PC. There is a small RFID reader that you'll have to attach to the USB drive. They can use their existing RFID badge, so they don't have to, be issued a new thing. You can have a second factor as a knowledge factor, which can be adaptive. So you can ask for once, but then don't ask for rest of the day, and then we can just authenticate them. But in many cases, some of you might be using a shared account, right? So you can now have an auditability of who was the individual behind the shared account. At the same time, for Windows, we still will be logging them into that shared account, which could be a floor supervisor, or any sort of shared account that you have put in place. Now you might have Okta, you might have Ping or an Azure. Regardless of what you have, we can authenticate them into those SSO systems. Hence, they get access to the apps that are connected to the system. Experience is pretty much the same thing. End user takes a selfie, and then through an SAML or an OIDC to redirect, we essentially authenticate them into the SSO system and take them to either their SSO system or directly to the apps. But in the end, it is the SSO system that is authenticating them. So that way, the apps that what you have today does not have to be changed. So essentially, you can keep the apps untouched, and then we just get added as an IDP within your SSO system, and then it handles the rest basically. So typically getting started or trialing for a small subset of users are pretty straightforward. And then, like we mentioned, you can use us as a second factor as well. So if you want to start off by saying, hey, our employees, we want to make MFA for everybody, including our frontline workers. However, they don't want to use their personal phones. They don't want to, use a company. We're not giving them any company issued phones, so there's some pushback. So you can actually add us as a second factor to your Entra ID or an Okta or any sort of SSO that you're running. But once you have this as an identity, that opens up opportunity to expand this to various places within your organization, including time and attendance. So this is an example of a face-based authentication on one of our customer sites. It's a quick selfie, and we are we're authenticating the end user, and then we are sending the punches to their time and attendance system. In this case, it's Kronos UKG, but it could be Workday, it could be ADP, it could be anything else, right? And for your legacy apps, for example, which is currently not in your SSO system, we have a suite of password managers, which essentially, again, the authentication doesn't change. The end user is again using the same familiar authentication that they've used up in the other scenarios, but we now autofill those credentials into that application, and then we log them in. We mentioned Zebra devices, again, same thing with Zebra devices. We become the lock screen for the Zebra devices. End user again takes a selfie. We not only log them into Zebra devices, but we also authenticate them into MDM and the SSO system. So we have very tight integration with most popular NVMs out there, like Workspace ONE, Intune, or SODI. So we can do a lot of things with them where we can just simply not just unlocking the device, but really taking them into their specific SODI profile, so that the existing way of doing things still remains in place. Well, we'll share with you this link. This has so many scenarios where you will be able to see if you have anything specific at your end, whether it's an iOS device. There should be a demo for that. If you don't see a demo, to reach us out. But I want to quickly switch to our platform. Really, it's built as an IAM identity management system, but for physical identity. So the source of truth still remains as your existing SSO system, right? In some cases, customers have asked us to be the proper IDP, but that I would say is more limited. But you can keep your existing systems, and you have full capability to manage everything in cloud. Just because it's cloud doesn't mean that it doesn't work for oil and gas, or high restrictive environment, because we have architecture that supports a full offline mode. So any of these apps that if it goes internet, loses internet, it works. And there are ways where you can also deploy it on-prem using our gateway servers and things like that. But more importantly, we know that in these industries, there's a lot of churn, and you might also have contingent workers. You might have people who are coming in and out. They may need temporary access to certain things. So we made onboarding really, really easy. So there are a lot of different ways to onboard, from automatically syncing from your sources of truth, whether it's HR systems or your Active Directory or Okta, or manual imports or supervisor-based imports, right? So all of those things are fully supported, and the end users can have fully they can manage themselves as well. There are a lot of self-onboarding options that is also available, where they can kind of add their own credentials using any of the authentication that currently is present, whether it's their SSO systems or their Windows login and things like that, right? So as an admin, most of the things are set it and forget it. You can monitor everything from the cloud, but at the end user level, they're essentially using it as usual. If things go offline, they're fine. And if they're terminated, if their status changes in Workday or your SSO system, all of those changes will be automatically reflected at our end. we basically delete the user, terminate the user, right? And those of you who wants to use biometric, we are one of the largest. We have one of the largest deployment of biometric in North America, which means we've deployed in states where there are laws around biometrics, whether it's CCPA, BIPA, and things like that. So over there, we provide a very robust consent management framework for our customers, where we work with you guys to and your legal team to basically guide them how to deploy this in Illinois, how to deploy this in California, because most of the states, all they say is to make sure you get consent. So we take that as our gold standard, and even in states where they don't require that, we can allow, you can still go ahead and take consent, which is a good practice to have. And your legal team has full control over the documentation, the version, all of those things, and we will present that consent to the end user, and they will essentially be able to give that consent, and we will digitally sign those consent and save it for later use, basically. So that's at a high level. There's also, as we are an enterprise grade product, so most of our customers are all Fortune 500 customers, so we understand the need for automation. So we have a low code, no code workflow engine that handles all of your automation to your even physical access control system, right? We have one of the few only companies in the world, I would say, who has built interfaces to physical access control system, all the top ones, whether it's Lenel or Secure or ProWatch or whatever it is. So that can get things like badge data automatically, so you don't have to onboard, and users don't have to do any manual onboarding. We can kind of automatically onboard them. So that helps with, on a long run, where you're essentially connecting to your data sources and things flow based on your existing workflows that you've set up. So I'll take a quick pause here. And yeah, if there's any question, I'm happy to answer that. Yeah, so we can quickly go through the next slide, Mohit. So I think even though the interface is the same for a lot of the experiences, but the underlying way to talk to these systems are different. So in case of an SSO system, we act as an OIDC SAML IDP. In some cases, we are a direct IDP, or we use APIs. For Windows, we are a credential provider or lock. For legacy apps, we have password managers and passkey managers that allow you to basically use it for even legacy apps. Of course, enterprise grade, like I mentioned, so we're SOC 2 type 2 certified, CCPA, BIPA compliant. We have a trust center that monitors our SOC 2 controls real time. So those of you who are interested can request access to our trust center, which is just trust.oloid.com, and that'll give you a full comprehensive list of what are our certification, which regulations do we comply with, and any kind of security questions you have relates to encryption or data privacy. We talked about automation briefly, but really the goal is the employee gets hired, they're added into your HR system and SSO system, but we just want to be part of that process, automatically sync those data to our end, so that way there's no new workflow that is needed for employee to be part of our system. And as soon as you've removed them from an HR or an SSO system, the employee is gone at our end as well. Yeah. So yeah, at a high level, like I said, we start off with one use case like passwordless MFA, but you can then take it to OD system and time and attendance and others. So most of our customers within the first 6-8 months, they see value to take it beyond the current use case they have signed up for. So over time, we've also seen use cases where they have come up with, which we even didn't think of. It could be a cafeteria, authentication for coupons or whatever it is, right? So we have SDKs and APIs that we allow you to kind of leverage. And for highly regulated industry on-prem kind of thing as well, we support a way to add gateway servers and different servers for localized access as well. So for example, cruise is a great example that where similar things can be applied to oil and gas and other verticals. Just a quick 2 minute on AI. So essentially, obviously, we didn't want to just build AI for sake of AI. So that was our goal from the beginning. But what we've realized is that there is a lot of potential for frontline workers using AI. So starting with this year, we'll be launching our security questions, AI generated security questions. So those of you who still use the security questions, we all hate it, right? So, but we are going to be bringing in where the end users are not setting the security questions, or they don't need to know the answers to the security questions accurately. Because we have all of these data, we will be providing a dynamically generated security question, and the end users can answer to the closest answer they know, and then it builds an identity confidence, and then it then authenticates them. Similar to if you've ever tried to enter your social security online, it asks you what are the last few addresses you've stayed at and things like that. So the experience is similar to that. And later next year we will be launching our own agents that allows the end users to authenticate and also take help, where using our computer use interface, we will be able to actually launch and do workflows in your applications, and then along with authenticating into those legacy applications, basically. Yeah, so that's the ultimate vision. So a lot of announcements coming up on the AI side next year. But I would really the goal is to today your frontline workers are taking up your supervisor's time, or if it's a personal paycheck access, then they're talking to their grandkids or whatever. We think that experience can be hugely improved by bringing an AI agent into the mix, where they can kind of communicate with an agent as if they would communicate with a human, and then the agent will help them essentially not just give them links and things like that and say, hey, this is how to solve it, but actually do things for them. And that's something we're very excited about. Yeah.
So yeah, we have another poll coming up. Thank you, Madhu. And I do want to acknowledge that a lot of the folks who are joining from the larger Houston area, probably from the energy vertical, just what I've heard from customers we have engaged with in that vertical, and some of the discussions we had at dinner. There is a real challenge in these remote environments where any delay, any of those friction with passwords, any onboarding, offboarding delays becomes a real massive business priority. So trying to get a sense of how you folks are looking at your passwordless programs, what's in play. So if you can take just a few seconds and respond to the survey, that'll just help educate us on where you think this fits in your priorities.
Madhu, I'll turn it back to you guys. I just want to kind of gather a little bit of information on relevancy, and so I don't know if you got any comments back to these guys for the last couple of minutes in terms of what they brought up, or any of you guys.
Yeah, and Al, if I could jump in, I could share a little bit of insights on how we've looked at biometrics with various large implementations. And this always comes up in context of specific states or certain unionized worker bodies. And I think the first question which we like to ascertain is, are biometrics being used for time clocking? Very common for fingerprint-based time clocks being used. And if that is the case, it sets a precedence of saying you are using biometrics in a certain context. It's just a better way of managing biometrics. And Cheryl, like you pointed out, you don't have to use face biometrics. There are advantages of not having to deal with hardware and RFID readers attached to computers. But while both those options are available, there is both cost and convenience trade-off. it is not a security trade-off. So while you may have insecure badges that can be cloned and copied, there is a significant safeguard that we have built in terms of potentially even having the second factor associated with it. You can combine a badge tap with a pin to prevent situations where you drop your card and somebody else picked it up. So I'll summarize by saying that there is a three-part discussion that usually takes place is one, what is the existing framework? What is the resistance from HR or legal? And are the precedences of that being used? If there is openness, then there's a discussion about consent frameworks and how this aligns with everything from a compliance standpoint, regulatory standpoint. And third is if biometrics is a no-go, then how can we use existing badges, make them more secure, augment them with a second factor, easy to manage, ties into your existing badge onboarding, offboarding workflow. And I think with a combination of the two and those options, we've been able to work across most environments where there might be some concerns one way or the other. So now I know we're almost up on time. If there are more questions, we'd love to pick that up. Our contact information will be made available. We'll send a follow-up email. But I'll hand it back to Al. But Madhu and I, on our behalf, I thank you all for joining. It's been a pleasure having you. And thank you for sharing those insights. That was tremendously valuable for us.
Thanks, Mohit. Thanks, Madhu. Yeah, if any of you have any questions or want to get with these guys, let me know or feel free to contact them directly. We appreciate your time and we want to respect it. So we're right at the end of the hour. I think we're going to end it. And thank you very much. And have a great day. Hopefully everybody stay dry in Houston. Might be tough today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Good.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.